Okay, so we will get going in 3, 2, 1. Going. Good evening. Welcome to the Urban Fantasy Track at Virtual Dragon Con. My name is Carol Malcolm. I'm the track director and your moderator for this evening. And our discussion of By Blood or By Choice, family in Buffy and Angel. The first thing we're going to do is have our panelists introduce themselves to you, and we'll start with Rachel over here.
Hi, I'm Rachel, otherwise known as R.E. Carr. I write urban fantasy. My Rules Undying series is finished, and I am currently writing the False Icon series with Rick Gualtieri.
Jeanne?
Jeanne?
Jeanne, yep.
I can't tell order from up here. Hi, I'm Jeanne Stein, and I write the Anna Strong Vampire series. The 10th book came out in December. And I also have a series called the Fallen Siren series that I've written with Samantha Summersby under the name S.J. Harper.
Okay, Father Bryan?
Hi. Good afternoon, evening, whenever. My name is Father Bryan Small. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm actually the closest one to the Westin at this very moment. I'm not sure what that gets me at this point, but so I've got a parish about 15 minutes to the east of downtown Atlanta, Saints Peter and Paul. Longtime Buffy fan and thrilled to be here.
Evan?
My name is Kevin Bachelder. I'm the assistant track director here for the Urban Fantasy Track. Many folks will be familiar with some of the podcasts I do covering genre TV, including the Tales of the Black Badge for Wynonna Earp, and certainly for this panel, the Buffy Earpers podcast that we do. That's a rewatch of Buffy with some comparisons to Wynonna Earp.
And Jeremy?
I'm J.F. Lewis. The J stands for Jeremy. The F stands for something else. And I write books that get me into trouble. Among them, the Void City series, which is my urban fantasy vampire stuff, and the Grudgebearer trilogy, which is epic fantasy. That I don't know. I think it appeals to both.
Yes, indeed. Now, I'd like to go ahead and start with Buffy first. And I mean, for kind of obvious reasons, the show did air first and, you know, kind of got the whole Buffyverse idea rolling for everyone. And aside from Buffy's, which we will examine, you know, more closely in just a few minutes, which blood family relationship that was on the show did you find the most intriguing or the most problematic? You know, you've got Xander and you've got Willow and Tara and even Spike. I mean, we get a little bit of each of their family situations in, you know, throughout the course of the series, but we do get a little bit of that. And I'm curious, which of those, as I said, did you find, you know, to be the most interesting, or the one that you just like, yeah, no, never would I want to know those people? And Rachel, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, I write about vampires, so I guess the literal blood family always intrigued me. I loved the whole dynamic when you had basically the Master to Darla to Angelus/Angel, and then you had Spike and Drusilla. I think I got them out of order, but I loved that whole family tree and just how antagonistic they were to each other. Because in a weird way, you'd think a vampire chooses its family, but they're really just stuck with each other. And the way they kind of form this pack that hates each other, it just always appealed to me. And I think I modeled some of, especially in my early writing days, of that kind of the vampire blood family. You know, if you can imagine having to have Thanksgiving 200 plus times with these people, oh, yeah, I would not want to be there.
I think one thing that's so interesting about Spike, the Spike story, Spike blood family, is that he turned his mother to save her. And
Yeah.
Right.
that didn't work out so well. So, but it's another interesting, aspect of Spike's blood family.
Yeah, he definitely had it worse of the whole family. I think he was always trying to find a place where he belonged, and that's why he had to move out of that more than the others did.
Well,
Father
maybe
Bryan, yeah.
it may be prosaic, but if you look at the relationship between Joyce and Buffy, it starts off very formulaic, very boilerplate, as every YA, fantasy, sci-fi, superhero, teen / because 50% of the tension in any given story is mom and dad going to find out? And it's all, and there's just as much energy on them keeping the secret from mom and dad as it is for whatever enemy or foil or antagonist. And so by reframing that and bringing Joyce in, and again, now it's almost kind of commonplace. Like a Stargirl. Anybody watching Stargirl?
No,
No?
Yes.
Okay. It's much better than I thought it would be. The CW stuff is all right, but Stargirl is really, really hitting it out of the park. Not just the production value, but across the board. But anyways, so the fact that they moved that relationship with Joyce beyond just that trope of keeping the secret from mom, I thought that was good. And then, of course, what they ultimately do with Joyce, of course, is heartbreaking, but also very real.
Yeah.
And part of life is losing a parent. So that was obviously a very defining moment in the course of the series. But I think the fact that they took it from the trope to something else, especially for its time, says a lot.
Right. Okay. Kevin.
Well, for me, I'd very much echo what Father Bryan said. That's certainly, when you mentioned the different possibilities, that's the one that instantly comes to mind too, because for me, that's the one that also seems the most real. Because we see development, we see the ups and downs, and that's something I think all of us, certainly can appreciate, having been on at least one side of that, part of a relationship. So, I mean, the stuff that we get to see, for example, with Willow or Xander as far as family, I mean, that is almost, cardboard. There's very little there, so there's not much to really compare to.
Until
Right. I don't think we even see.
No, I was just gonna
Right.
say.
And I think we don't see. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Carol. Go ahead. I was just
I
gonna
was
say.
just saying, I don't think we even see Xander's family, do we, until the wedding?
No, I don't think you do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just hear about them.
That's right.
And Jeanne,
Like
go
Fear
ahead.
of
I'm sorry.
Fears, referenced but never seen.
Right. Right.
Well, I just thought I think the episode too where Willow's mom, turns into this avenging, let's kill all the witches kind of thing. That was a very interesting episode for me, because Willow to me always seemed almost motherless. It almost seemed like she always just had herself to take care of. And then all of a sudden her mother is introduced, and all hell breaks loose. So I thought that was another interesting example too of a blood family relationship that really goes off the rails.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to put it. Especially in that episode, right? Gingerbread, wasn't that the name of that one? Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, one of the interesting relationships, particularly with how it changes, is we're doing a rewatch through of Buffy, and the relationship between Xander and Buffy goes from incredibly cringy, where he's not really her friend for several seasons. He's just waiting to pounce. And then eventually he actually does become a friend, and then almost like a brother. And I was like, okay, thank goodness that there is that payoff, because otherwise, and maybe it's the age of the show and the dynamic, but really when we were watching back through it, my sons were looking at me going, he would get expelled.
like 20 years later, which is also kind of hard to believe. But that's a good point. Yeah, he was a bit of a creeper, wasn't he? At some point. Now,
What high school boy wasn't, though? Let's put that in perspective. There were plenty of creepers in high school.
I suppose that's true. But now, it seems to me that all of season 5, I mean, we got the introduction of Dawn, of course, and as was referenced earlier, the death of Joyce. It seems to me as though all of season 5 is really about family and sacrifice. And it's also interesting, I think, to watch the progression of Buffy learning how to care about Dawn. You know, and, I mean, do you all remember watching the episode for the first time, that first one of that season, and Buffy's got a sister, and you're like, what? You know, it's like this came out of left field. But I think that whole season was kind of just an example of her progression of learning what it was to be a sister. You know, she didn't have any experience before, of course, and then of having to take over as a mother, you know, essentially as well. And just, I'm curious about your thoughts about that season and how that storyline progressed. I mean, were you on board with it the whole time? Did you feel as though that it was realistic? I mean, for a genre show, of course, in terms of the development of the personal relationships. And Jeremy, we'll start with you this time and go around the other way.
I had a very much the okay, so we're doing the Brady Bunch thing where you're introducing the new younger cast member so that we can have high school problems again.
Right.
But I do think that they transcended that with Dawn, and she actually did become an interesting character. But at first, I was very kind of like, okay, guys, this is very tropey. Could we please? But it really did have a payoff.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember seeing that for the first time. I'm someone who came to Buffy on DVD. I thought I missed a DVD. I was like, where did she come from? I missed an episode or something. So they did a good job at that. But no, as far as the character, you're right. As we went along, that, to me, that was a little bit of a microcosm of what the whole show was, in the sense for me that Buffy is very much about that found family and creating, you know, that support system around you. So watching Buffy deal with this when she found out about the key and all of that, and having it, as Siri said, transcend just a trope of a new surprise sibling, became very real and became an example of what happens in life when sometimes a situation is thrust upon you. What are you going to do? And that was a great way of showing how Buffy could deal with it and have it become much more than just an arm's length sibling.
Right, and there's actually in episode 13, after Dawn finds out what she is, when Buffy tells her it doesn't matter where you came from or how you got here, you are my sister. Mm-hmm. And you know that at that point she's already convinced herself, but it is something that you know she had to come to terms with herself. Father Bryan, what about you?
Yeah. Well, casting is always everything, and you can't imagine anyone else playing these characters. But from a writing standpoint, that whole story arc and the believability of that, Michelle Trachtenberg made that and sold that in a way that I don't think necessarily anybody else could have. I couldn't imagine anybody else playing Dawn but her. And just because it does start off with, you know, the cousin Oliver sibling, but again, it starts with the tropes and then it goes somewhere else. But I think especially, again, it's been a while, but because there is a very tender transition between once they putting all the pieces together, where on an emotional level, Buffy could have completely have disassociated herself. Mm-hmm. But she didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even when it's, I think for me, again, it's a while, but it's the realization that memories weren't real. Yeah. And that was like the fork in the road that, okay, I can just shake the Etch-a-Sketch and move on. But she doesn't do that. because goodness steers you in a different direction. You can do what's orderly and safe or do something different. And Buffy doesn't do what's orderly and safe. That's not the essence of the character. And so to care for Dawn, to love Dawn, not just as a sister, but in a maternal way, you know, that's the strength. That's the power. Right.
Jeanne.
Well, and just to kind of continue on that theme too, I think one of the, well, first of all, I had the same kind of reaction when I first saw that episode where all of a sudden she had a sister. It was like, how the hell is Joss going to pull it off? But he does. He always does. He's just tremendous. But I think another part that struck me too is when Buffy realizes that she not only has to help, she can't just protect Dawn. She has to help her learn to face and fight danger. And so she has to let her grow up. She has to let Dawn grow up. So, which I think is a very difficult thing to do when you're an older sister and you have no, and I'm saying this that we all know, of course, their story, but if you're an older sister with a younger sister and you've lost your mother, and it's up to you then to really raise this kid, which is what she ended up having to do. It's a fine line knowing what Buffy's life is, between trying to just protect her and letting her share in the danger and learn how to fight it.
Yes, there's a moment at the end of season 6 when they're fighting in the ground, you know, trying to, you know, when Dark Willow has all these things coming at them. And when Buffy says, well, I've been trying to protect you from the world and I should have been showing it to you.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of what you're talking about there.
Exactly.
Rachel.
Well, the thing that always struck me was it was the single most Gen X storyline possible. I mean, maybe because I'm of that generation, you know, growing up, I was just a little bit older than high school when Buffy came out, but it was always it seemed like a new family member would come because there were so many divorces and so many reshuffles, and almost everyone I knew had that. All of a sudden you had to completely readjust. Like your world was perfect, and then someone new got shoved in because of something that happened with your parents or something you couldn't control. And I love the fact that you could take a fantasy element and give you something to relate to, that you don't have to just shove the other away. And that even if someone comes into your life suddenly, you can still be close to them. I mean, I have 2 Russian step siblings now. So I think Buffy in a weird way helped prepare me for that.
Well, the most absurd phrase ever is the blended family.
Yes, yeah, we're totally mixed
chunky.
master. Yes, it's super chunky, and Russian in my case.
Well, now making the switch over to Angel, which is quite a contrast in terms of, you know, I think that in Angel we get more of a family background for some of the characters. They, other than Angel, of course, but his parents didn't last long in his backstory. So, but in terms of, you know, finding out, we get to see some of these people, some, you know, people like Wesley's father and Lorne and Fred and Gunn. We get to see all of them and their relationships with, you know, those with their actual blood families. And what I'm curious about is, which of those relationships did you feel was probably most influential in helping you understand the characters, that particular character? And, you know, for example, did Gunn's relationship with his sister, you know, kind of inform what his character was like for you, or one of the others, if you, know, anybody besides Angel, I suppose, at this point. Jeremy, we'll start with you this time.
Great.
I'm glad she started with you, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's just,
yeah, we're all like, we can think of an answer.
I don't know. I think the family I was the most interested in was Lauren's, if that makes any sense. And I feel like we even though we had we had some episodes. They're the ones that I would have liked to know more about, because to me it was the most interesting. Everybody else's, there is a tendency, if we don't get enough of them, that they're really there just to be a plot point. And to me, that was just readily apparent in a lot of the relationships there. And I don't know. It's the and then there's the horrible relationship, I guess, between Angel and Connor. But
Oh, well, that's a
We'll
whole
get there- we'll
plot
get there in a
point.
minute, yeah.
He went there.
Okay, Kevin.
Well, it's I don't know if it's funny, but it's interesting for me when I think of Angel very much, and I look through the character list. And we all know, we've seen all the discussions over the years of how Buffy is the coming of age, the high school part of our lives, and watching that, and Angel is the young adult time. And that to me really comes through, because to me, when you look at the characters up and down on Angel, their development and who they become, both as individuals and in the larger group, has so little to do with the blood relations they have on that show. I mean, yes, we didn't get a lot of time on them, certainly, maybe Gunn and his sister. But I think that's where Angel really shines as a show, in my memories of it, and even going back on it, is that it does mirror that young adulthood into 20s and so forth time in your life, when you realize that whoever you grew up with now is likely not going to be very much a key part of your life anymore. This is where you develop in the relationships. And you get very often you get to, quote, start over, because you don't have the baggage of people around you who remember you when you were a teenager or whatever. So, and I think we got to see a lot of that too, because Gunn got a chance to step out from his rough past. Certainly Wesley, rogue demon hunter, and all of the buffoonness that we saw in Buffy goes away. And there's some just amazing character development there. And everybody, even Cordy, is so much older. So I don't think of many of their blood relations there on Angel. There's just too much fascinating development on their own.
And to piggyback on that for just a minute, to me, it is funny the extent to which Angel's family and friends are kind of thrust upon him. They decide we're your new family now, and then won't go away.
Right. So he can't just sit in his room and brood all the time. Yeah.
Or watch hockey. He likes to watch hockey.
Father Bryan, what about you?
Obviously, the dynamic between Angel and Connor is its own thing. And I'm not even sure, especially the last episode, there was no easy way to resolve that. But I think for me, the most heartbreaking relationship in the whole, in that one of the series, is with Wesley / Fred / Illyria.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that was the most tragic, because it was just all the pieces what could have been, but just wasn't. I think that was the most, from a watching standpoint, I mean, that was just the most like, oh.
Right. Yeah, that was tough. That was a tough one. Jeanne?
I think Darla.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because she made the ultimate sacrifice so that Connor could be born, and then everybody at Angel Investigations took care of him. But we first saw her as that high school cheerleader costume, vamping those guys. But I think her progression, she just became, no, I can't say almost human, but she rose above herself, and the fact that she would allow herself, or would kill herself, actually is what she did, to save her baby, was I thought quite moving and quite touching. And it just gave Darla, after all the craziness with Drusilla and and their backstory, I think Darla had a very noble end. I'll put that one.
And from a special effects standpoint, it was a great way to birth a baby.
Yeah, it certainly seemed more comfortable than what I went through.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Except for the part where you were still alive afterwards.
Yeah.
There is that. So
Details.
that's true. All right. Rachel.
Well, if you're talking about blood relations, I have a very special like relationship with Wesley as a character, because I do feel that like when you have the overbearing parent that expects so much, and that how it molds you into a person that literally will do anything to change, like you either have to run away from it, or you're very codependent, like you're always eager to please. And I could see that in his, even though he was basically a plot point as his dad, I could see a lot in his character. And I think that sort of rejection and that anger towards a parental figure led to further resentment against Angel, particularly later in the series, because in a way Angel was sort of the new father figure of the whole dynamic. I mean, literally, once he had Connor.
Mhm.
But Wesley was kind of that oldest child, always trying to please but never could.
Yeah.
And at least that made sense, even if it was a little more heavy-handed than some of the relationships in Buffy, and I can appreciate that. And then you later have Spike as like the little baby brother who can do no wrong and keeps coming in and saving the day. So there is that dynamic of the found family versus the actual.
Well, and to talk about the Connor and Angel relationship a little bit, do you feel, I mean, that was problematic from the beginning, from
Oh, yeah.
when he came back from the demon realm, of course, especially if you've been listening to it in your ear for, 17 years or 18 years, then, or however old he was, you know, he came back with all these preconceived notions of what his father was like. Many of them not accurate to what Angel was like, anymore. But did you feel as though that relationship, which they didn't get quite as long to, resolve that over time as they did some of the others that had been, for characters that had been in the show for the whole 5 years or whatever. But were you satisfied with how that relationship was resolved? And Rachel, we'll start. You're already shaking your
No,
head.
I
Okay,
mean,
we'll start with
that's
you.
one of the ones where you could tell that they needed more seasons. I think that was a relationship that it was so tricky, and there were so many, let's face it, there's some complicated, difficult, anger-inducing, if you're a woman, issues that kind of led to Connor already. But when you skip 17 years of development already with the character, you need more time to resolve it. I think they did pretty well with what they had, but it just always felt rushed to me. I felt like you were cheated on what could have been a gold mine, because, Angel finally had a chance to like mold someone and teach someone, like he has the whole crew of Angel Investigations, and he never really got that. And it always felt like it was a bit, well, we have to get him out of the way because we have to wrap up all these other storylines, and we're, amnesia. When in doubt, always amnesia. It's the writer's 101. And I did feel like it was a little bit of a cop-out, I won't lie.
Jeanne?
Yeah, I think so. And the Connor, Cordelia, Jasmine thing too.
Oh.
I know. I mean, that was, I had a hard time with that storyline. Let me just put it that way. I had a really hard time with that storyline. But I do agree with you, Rachel, though. I don't think they had enough time. I don't think they had enough time. If they had more seasons, we would have seen, I think, much more development in Connor. Angel would have had a chance to forge more of a relationship with his son. So yeah, I do agree. I think they tried to cram too much into that last bit. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely the sense that fourth wall politics or fourth wall dynamics were playing major factors in story writing decisions. And it's just kind of, and especially now, just in the last few weeks, you know, Joss has been trending again for all the wrong reasons. And that just kind of sort of seems to sort of underscore it all, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunate. That's the word we should stop at.
Well, it's the perennial issue of separating the work from the artist.
Yeah. But it seemed to bleed over in that storyline.
Right. I remember when I was doing my rewatch of the series last year, and season 4 was never one of my favorites that I was, looking forward to, and so I was kind of dreading it. And it's, when I watched it the first time, and then the times that I had seen episodes since that was typically the one that I would avoid. Although there, it's like if you get too focused on that one area, though, there were a lot of other good things about that season. There were some interesting points, and so I was glad when I did the rewatch that I was able to get some of the good out of it too. Well, Father Bryan, do you have anything more you'd like to add about Connor and Angel?
God, it's been so long. Sorry. I was just thinking about I love and adore Gina Torres. And to have Gina Torres, and I just, and especially, and I'm not trying to step on the landmine, but especially now when it comes to perception of public figures and different people seeing different things, in some ways that is more salient now than ever before. But again, I just got the sense that whole season, there's a while there that it just seemed that between all various, that Joss was running back and forth between Buffy, Angel, and whatever else he was working on. But that he would have been gearing up for Firefly right around then too. Anyways, whatever. It just seemed like the kids were not getting consistent attention.
Yeah.
It was not equal. Kevin.
I'll be bluntly honest and say I have nothing to add to this part of things. That hasn't already been said. I think, we all know the issues with the storyline, the way it played out, and upon reflection, a lot of it. So, no, I have nothing else to add, very honestly.
Had there been a do-over, I'm sure it would have been better.
Yeah.
We hope.
Well, and that's because we all know what Joss and his writing team.
Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's always tricky in shows to stick that landing when we go, okay, we've given you a baby, now what are we going to do? Well, obviously we're going to turn that baby into an adult or a teenager, and either you do it in an episode and then they die tragically at the end or something, or but there aren't a whole lot of good ways to stick that particular landing. And I think in ways it's similar in some ways to the intro of Dawn. It's just that the intro of Dawn worked and the intro of Connor, to me, didn't. And it didn't ruin the whole season, but it certainly would, for me anyway, tainted it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think there was a subtext that tainted.
Well, I have a quote here from a gentleman called Jess Bettis, and the book is called Blood Relations, and it's about chosen families in Buffy and Angel. And what he says here is that, well, if I had the right page, that would probably be helpful. Family is the equation that both of the show's pilot episodes open with: the discovery and assemblage of a core group, and the support system that emerges again and again for these characters to fall back on. It is the sense of belonging that these exiles achieve. And so that's pretty much the focus of that whole book, was only that. But my next question for you is that in relation to the Scoobies on Buffy, how do you think that the backgrounds of their blood families maybe influenced their role within the Scooby Gang? I mean, some of the different, and people aside from Buffy, of course, because Buffy was lucky enough to have both. She had the blood family, and then she had the Scoobies as well. But some of the other characters weren't quite as fortunate to have, the same kinds of relationships that she had. And Jeremy, we'll start with this side.
I don't know. I mean, definitely, I think it was mentioned earlier, the whole thing with Willow and Willow's mom, and we only see the. But I think that are we talking about how they work together as a found family, or?
Yes, and kind of. Well, for example, to me, it seemed as though Willow, because of the way her own family was with her, she was able to be more of herself with the Scoobies. She was able, she doesn't have to, worry about what her mom might think about what she's wearing that day or whatever, that kind of thing, that she could kind of blossom a bit more. And I felt as though Xander enjoyed being, after he got over his goofiness, which, oh, let's face it, never completely went away, but I mean, he did mature as time went on, that he kind of became more reliable, which he kind of had to do within his own family as well. I mean, stuff like that. Did you see instances of that kind of, that kind of backstory or history for them that influenced how they, what their role within the Scooby family was, is kind of what I'm wondering.
Yeah, it's we're wrapping up season 4 in our current rewatch through of Buffy, and I think it's interesting to watch Xander become kind of the first successful adult in the crew. But also the way that does kind of help him grow, as when he realizes, okay, wait, I can help you guys out in this way, and of course I will. You need me to what? Come hang sheetrock? All right, I know how to do that,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like the way that, it's kind of where we find out, are they all real friends? Have they all chosen each other as their found family? Is kind of particularly after the body and once Joyce passes away, as they all kind of have to cling together. When we find out, no, they are
Mm-hmm.
all in with each other. And unfortunately, some of the plot points wind up spinning some of them away and kind of breaking them away from the group. But to me, that core of watching them all cling together, not just when there is a supernatural thing, but like when the laundry needs done, is the cool part to me.
Yes. Kevin.
Yeah, I love that point about the laundry, because that was what was running through my head. Is if you're going to have 7 seasons to watch characters and their relationships, it can't always be demons and apocalypses. There's got to be, the routine part of life. And that was what was fun about watching some of that Scooby stuff. Xander is a great example. Even Willow, interacting with Dawn and different things where, people had to step up and be there for each other. Not necessarily the whole Scooby gang, but for the different segments of the characters. Who were they able to help better? And, they all had their challenges with their blood family in the past. And that's the great thing of once you have a found family is, well, I know what I didn't get when I was younger, so I'm going to make extra hard to bring it to it. And I think that was good. There was enough variety from all of them interacting there to kind of see where they were able to go with it.
Okay. Father Bryan?
Well, historically, the journey of every hero is a new understanding, a realization of your origins. Like Superman finds out he's from Krypton. Harry Potter finds out he's a wizard. And
right.
But with Buffy, the transition is not a new origin, but it's again going from blood family to this new intentional family. And again, sort of like if you look at the first decade of the Christian experience, these are people who basically had lost their families, that they were basically kicked out. And so this community of faith, it became their intentional community. That became their primary place for emotional support. So everybody comes with their own deficit, that their blood family, as a part of their dynamic and their blood family, but coming to the intentional family, coming to the Scoobies, that deficit is part of what makes them click. But
Right,
fundamentally,
right.
it comes down to two things. It's, do you believe because you belong, or do you belong because you believe?
Right. Okay.
And because basically what binds them is shared trauma, vampires. And so they believe this thing that no one else gets, that no one else in the school can see. It's almost a bit of Gnosticism, that they have secret inner knowledge, but again, it's also traumatic in its own way. And so they believe this thing, and so that's what brings them together. But it's the belonging. But it's my own experience that, you know, as the decades go by, that it's almost like a tandem bike, and one is pedaling more than the other at certain times. It's your belonging that fuels your belief, and sometimes it's your belief that keeps you belonging.
We need a T-shirt that says that. That's a good quote. Jeanne?
Well, I think I've always been in awe and kind of envious of Buffy's chosen family of the Scoobies, because Giles was the perfect father figure. Willow was the sister, and Xander was the brother figure who had the huge heart, who was more human, I think, than any of the other ones, than any of the others. And I thought that was really exemplified when he had that talk with Dawn, when she was feeling so left out, and and she was just bereft that she didn't belong, and the way he acted with her, the way he talked to her, and the way he just made her feel that no, she was a very important part of the family. She was as important as anybody else. And I always wished that I'd had a family like that. I mean, I don't want to be fighting vampires all the time, and I write about them too, Rachel. So, but just the idea that that there are people that you don't have to continually prove yourself to. They love you, they accept you, they're there to help you. It's just a wonderful thing. I always was in awe of her chosen family.
Rachel?
Well, since everyone else is covered all of them, like, I think someone does need to just how Buffy kind of grew from all of this, because I think, especially in the beginning, it's all about she's the lone hero. Yeah. She's got Giles. I mean, she does have Giles from the beginning, but it's pretty much her. And, always having to like take the bullet for everyone else, always having to be the leader. And I think something that's important to know is that as the whole storyline, I think the body is that key, is that she can't save everyone. She can't fix everything. And the way they all come together and support her is what allows her in the end of season 5 to sacrifice herself for everyone else, because it's sort of come full circle and she's truly belonging. She doesn't have to be alone anymore. Because I think even in the beginning, that even though she had all these people around her, she was always still very guarded and very isolated. And I loved seeing that whole arc. And to me, I mean, I'm one of those people who's like, did the show really kind of end at season 5? Like, it's a beautiful arc. And then there are some good parts of later seasons, but I love that whole transition and how that family gives her the strength to do what she has to do, because she's ultimately the protector of the whole family, no matter what.
An interesting thing for me, if I might jump in here, is what I love about the series too is that the beauty, as you said, Rachel, of how season 5 ended, and how that was like could be a perfect, stick a bow on it, walk away. And then we come back with season 6 and 7, and there's so much darkness in 6 and so forth. But I think that's a great way of looking at real life. We all probably at some point in our lives, professionally or personally, have just an amazing accomplishment or something that you just think, wow, it might not get any better than this. And, maybe it doesn't. But you learn that life still goes on, and there's still other things that are going to happen. And that's where I think Buffy is such a great example of that. Lots of TV shows build up to that big apex finale, and okay, that's not what life is about oftentimes. So I thought that was a great way of looking at it too.
Yes, and I mean, and some of the I think some of the show's best episodes came out of the last 2 seasons. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe not necessarily the seasons as a whole, even though
Yeah.
I always enjoyed all of them. But I you know, I did that there was a lot going on in those last 2 seasons that added to the story. But I do agree that season 5 did almost feel as though it was, but of course that was also the breaking point between the WB and the CW and all of that. So that was kind of an interesting thing as well. And we didn't really get, we've talked about the body just a little bit, but, and I know Rachel really wanted to talk about this, and we've talked about it some. I have one more thing I want to talk about with Angel, but if we want to give everybody just give kind of a quick assessment of what you thought of that episode. For me personally, I think it's the one that I've seen more than any other of them. It was, I watched it, I don't know how many times, and I think it was such an impact on the characters and on the show, on the storyline. But I think what it did to people as viewers was really important. So that's kind of my 2 cents. But Jeremy, we'll start with you and we'll go around. How did you feel about that particular episode?
See, this is a hard one for me because, I am very much not in the Joyce fan club. I do think that she became a much better character in season 4 and season 5 when they stopped writing her as so much as a caricature of a parent, and she actually got some real moments. But I always feel guilty in that episode because it's like, oh yeah, goodness, she's finally gone. And then I feel bad because I'm happy and the characters are sad, and I'm sad that they're sad.
Right.
But boy, I was glad to see the character go, which is, so mixed emotions.
Carol, I didn't really hear the question.
They were talking about the episode, The Body?
The body.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just,
How
Yeah,
it affected you.
yeah. Kevin, what about you?
Well, it's interesting for me. Buffy is a show that I am constantly rewatching beginning to end. I'm one of those purists who likes to start at the beginning, work my way to the end, wait a little bit, and start it again. Even though I will from time to time watch things in between or fan stuff or whatever. The Body is the one episode that I dread rewatching. It's too real. It is too much of a visceral impact on Buffy and the other characters. These characters that I have grown to love and to be able to feel what they feel. So to watch that again, not that it wasn't brutal the first time, but knowing it's coming, I mean, I can feel myself tensing up as I get closer to that episode to rewatch, very honestly, because of the way it's done. I appreciate it, from a TV viewer point of view and acting and, direction choices and lack of music and everything, but actually watching it as a fan, that is just brutal. So, I have to give them a lot of credit, but doesn't mean I have to like it.
Right. Father Bryan?
It's interesting that during the arc of the show, when Whedon was getting accolades for how witty his dialogue was, he wrote Hush. And then when he was getting criticism about the violence, what's the one episode when there's like the incubus in the frat house?
Yeah.
So when people say too much violence, go, here, have some sex. And so there's always like this kind of reversal. And so in that same vein, the irony is that the most powerful episode is very, very natural. The most powerful episode of a supernatural series is very natural. Except for the one thing at the very, very end, which I would argue almost shouldn't have been there.
No, I would, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, because that's the only real reminder that it's in this Buffy world.
Right.
So I just think in terms of the overall thing that's just that's kind of Whedon is a writer of reversals in a way. But on a personal level, and I've mentioned this before, but I was 19 when my mom died of a brain aneurysm, And so I think this episode aired like maybe 4 years afterwards. And so
Oh,
I
geez.
watched it when it came on. I've never rewatched it because
Oh,
I kind of
yeah.
lived it before I watched it.
Gotcha.
And watching it was just a very visceral experience. The one thing that gets me is when she has the flashback to they're in the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had
right.
just a gazillion times. And so, I mean, that just really, so again, I don't think and not that I'm refusing to, it's just, but to Kevin's point, it's just, and it's masterful. It's masterful, but it's eviscerating.
Yes.
By design.
Yeah, I think that was the point.
Mm-hmm.
Jeanne.
You know, I mean, I agree with what Father Bryan said too. Do that when I rewatch a series or a program, and there's something coming up that I don't really want to watch again. But it's, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like I can't look away. I always make myself watch it, but then I'm always depressed for weeks after. So maybe I can do. It's real. It was just real. Her reactions were spot on, and I just, it couldn't have been done any better, I don't think.
Rachel?
Well, I went through the same thing that Father Bryan did. I watched the episode when my mom was alive, and I always thought that would be a horrible thing, that I could never imagine it. And then my mom died, and I watched the episode again, and I remember thinking that silence, the silence at the beginning where you could see people's mouths moving, but the words didn't hit. And that moment, it hit like a truck. Even thinking about it now, I'm tearing up, because it's one of those rare moments where fiction gives you that catharsis, that pure moment, because sometimes it's ugly. I've seen other things like that bring out just visceral, ugly emotions. I can't take them all the time, but when you need that, it's so wonderful that it exists. I mean, it is art. It's painful. And I do understand even, what Jeremy said is like part of you, when you first watch, it's like, oh, well, at least that character, it's important to her arc. And as a writer, I go, oh, this is her moving on. This is important. Watching it again after my mom died, I was like, this is exactly what you feel.
Yeah.
And it's gutting.
Right. And it did bring, what I also appreciated about it was the fact that they did a nice job of showing you how everybody else within, all of the Scooby, the Chosen family, how they reacted. It wasn't just Buffy and Dawn's reactions. Of course, those are the ones that, well, Buffy's being the most visceral, but then, and there's the I guess the slight speech that Anya makes about not understanding why, I don't understand why she won't be able to do this again. I mean, you've got somebody who'd been immortal and no longer was, and to lose somebody she cared about was very difficult for her. So, I mean, even somebody as self-centered as Anya was affected by it, and I think,
to me, Anya's speech is one of the most impactful moments of the episode, because here's somebody who everybody really does not have the patience right at that moment for her to not understand. But then when they realize how much it is that is so well delivered, that then everybody, then Willow, I think she says, oh, well, none of us know why. And that's when I think Willow in particular kind of connects more with Anya in that moment than she ever had before. Because it's like you realize, no, Anya has some funny moments, but she's very real too.
Yeah.
Oh yes. She's like the grown up and scary version of Amelia Bedelia, who takes everything literally or something. I don't know. Children's book reference, but anyway, yes. And I think that just seeing, their reactions, but also how they interacted with each other, while they were having their reactions was, was very telling as well. So, the fact that because at the time, I think they also feel for Buffy, not just, they're thinking about how did she feel in addition to how does it make them feel. And that's really what, you want in a chosen family. Would all like that in our blood family, but not everybody has that, has that advantage there. So in any case, I think we are out of time, which is a very sad thing. But I would like to thank all of you. Normally at this time, if we were in person, I would be asking our audience to give you a hand. So I will do it myself. And thank you so very much for being here with us. And all of you will be on our programming again during the con. So I thank you. I thank you for your service for this panel and for everything that you've done in the past and are yet to do. So
Well,
good night, everyone, and thank you so very much.
Until 2021.
Indeed.
Yes.
Right.
Enjoy.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Carol.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe. Stay safe, everybody.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.